Welcome to Get Real with Brian Stuckey, an all-new program to get you real information about how real estate affects you, your family, and your community. Brought to you in part by Bankers Network Corporation. And now, Brian Stuckey.
Good evening. Welcome to Get Real. I'm Brian Stuckey. I'm excited about 2012, and I'm excited about my first show of 2012. In the property page segment, I have Jeff Hansen coming on. He's with Keller Williams. He's a real estate agent there, and we're going to find out what's going on in the real estate market. I think it's going to be pretty exciting. We're going to find out from Jeff if that's so or not. And then in the By the Numbers segment, Kurt Anderson with Anderson Architects. There's things called entitlements, and that's where, there's a lot of things about how much you could build, with the fence lines, how far you can build from the fence. There's a lot of different things that you need to know if you're thinking about doing any building projects, and we'll find out. And then the weekly spotlight, Rhamsis Muncada. He's the editor of newballpark.org. And are the Oakland A's coming to San Jose? We don't know yet, but we're going to find out what the update is on that. And then finally, in the lifestyle segment, Suzanne St. John Crane. She's the general manager here at CreaTV. It's a wonderful year that they had last year. We're going to see what's going on in 2012 with that. But first, the property page segment with Jeff Hansen. My guest is Jeff Hansen. He is a real estate agent with Keller Williams. He's here by popular demand. And Jeff, thanks for coming on.
Good to see you. How are things for you?
Things are phenomenal. One thing I read in the Mercury News today is it was talking about the rates. We're dating ourselves right now, this being January 17th. But it talked about how rates are so low. Of course, with refinances, I'm quite busy with those. But they were talking about this should be an exciting year with real estate, with home sales.
I like how the intro you mentioned exciting, that the real estate market will be exciting. Mm-hmm. So what I have noticed that we get more real estate in the press and more interest than I think ever in a down cycle, right? When home values are down, and it's just much more interesting to people. Mm-hmm. And the question I get all the time is, where's the market going? Mm-hmm. Where's the market going the next 12 to 16 months? But I also noticed nobody asked me that when values were booming.
Sure.
Nobody was asking when's it going to peak, but now everybody wants a crystal ball for when things are going to turn around.
Sure. Well, let's kind of recap what 2011 was like. How would you, put 2011 historically versus other years?
Well, I think in the future, if we go out 5 or 10 years, we'll look back and say this is probably the bottom of the market.
Okay.
So values, we went through steep declines in almost every category, every price range, and 2011 was pretty steady. The number of sales is relatively stable. There aren't more or less short sales or distressed sales, REOs, bank-owned properties that are coming on the market or selling. They're just relatively stable. Values are kind of flat. And if we track values over a long period, we had values that went way above the long-term trend for income compared to prices, and that, which is unsustainable as it turns out, right? Mm-hmm. Now we've seen values down below the long-term trend for incomes and affordability.
Well, I guess the thing is that are we out of the woods when it comes, as you mentioned, short sales and banker-owned, bank-owned? Are we through that, or we're still going to see that in 2012, wouldn't you think?
A bunch more in 2012, yeah. I mean, all indications, in fact, there was a front page story in the Mercury last week that predicted a slight increase in values this coming year, which is the first time I've seen any major local publication predicting property values increasing. But we're definitely going to still see a flood of, if you look at the delinquencies, people that are past due on their mortgage, it's still massive. So there are a lot of people that are still in trouble, can't afford their mortgage, or choosing not to pay their mortgage, and that's going to continue.
Okay. Now, so I'm used to saying, is it a buyer's market or a seller's market? And I think it's clearly, a buyer's market when it comes to if you want to do these short sales and that type of thing. You're going to get some good bargains, but it's not a bad situation for sellers.
For sellers that need to sell, it's the market that they choose, right? And I've had clients, I got a client last year that owned for 30 years. So compared to what they paid, they have a ton of equity. If you look at their long-term rate of return, it's excellent, even though values are down right now. So it's a market where sellers are selling that have to sell, and buyers are buying that are optional. But it would be, let me ask you this. Could you imagine a better buyer's market?
No,
with interest rates at 4% and values down historically? You just couldn't create a better time for buyers to buy.
Yeah, well, you just said that the sellers that are selling are in a situation where they have to. Or maybe they're downgrading, they've got an empty nest now. and maybe they're moving out of the area, they're going their vacation home in the Sierras or something, you know. So would you say 2012 is definitely going to be a buyer's market?
Definitely a buyer's market and an investor's market. So two kinds of buyers. Buyers, conventional first-time buyers or people moving up, but also investors, because we've seen values flat, but rents have gone up the last 2 years.
Okay.
So people are paying more in rent. Rents are more competitive. If you're out there renting, well, if you're renting, first-time buyers, their choice is to rent forever or buy, right? Mm-hmm. And the people that are renting are going to be facing competition and other tenants competing for limited supply. And so if you're buying right now as an investment, if you're buying real estate as an investor, it's just ideal because rents are up and values are still down, rates are low.
Sure. Okay. And are you seeing a lot of people that are investor-oriented?
Two ways. One, people, like I have a client that I wrote down for literally yesterday that is an investor paying all cash. But you also have, I don't know what the word for this would be, but sort of unintended investors, people that own a property and they want to move up or down into a different property, but they're keeping the first one as a rental.
Oh, I see. Uh-huh.
Because they're realizing, why sell now when prices are down? Might as well hold on to it as a rental, which is great. The best returns in real estate are never selling, right?
Yep.
The longer on the better, as you know.
Well, great. Jeff Hansen's been our guest. Once again, he's a real estate agent with Keller Williams. And if you have any questions for myself or any of my guests, please get a hold of me at 408-512-8366 or Brian at 4bestloan.com. We're coming up next in the By the Number segment with Kurt Anderson. My guest is Kurt Anderson. He's been on our program quite a bit. We've talked about green architectural decisions that you need to make. Us being in California, certainly we're green oriented. But Kurt, we want to talk about entitlements, which I can tell you, I've done some work around my house. I added 130 square feet on the master bedroom, and there's some considerations that I needed. In fact, that was some of the first questions I ever had, was that how far can I build from the fence? So what exactly are entitlements in general, if anybody wants to build or if they want to do any remodeling?
Well, first off, Brian, it's good to see you.
Oh, good to see you too.
I'm glad to see you're doing better after your little football.
We both had a mutual little bicycle accident.
Yeah, yes, we did. So, Brian, entitlements means what you are able to do with your property. So every city, every community has a set of rules. It's called the zoning ordinance. And that establishes setbacks, height restrictions, how big of a house you can put on that particular site. And whether it's a brand new house or it's a remodel or a renovation with an expansion, you have to go through a series of steps to make sure you fit within the rules. If you don't go through this entitlement process, they can actually make you tear that down if you don't go through the entitlements and then the permits. But we'll talk about permits in the next show. Yeah. So entitlements is dealt with what they call the planning department. It could be community development, again, depends on the city. So the setbacks have to deal with how far the building is from the property line. You have a front setback, you have a side setback, and a rear setback. So you have to maintain that structure within that envelope.
Why do they have that anyway? I mean, it's like, why do they have these setbacks?
Well, Brian, that's because it has to do with the right of privacy and airspace for the adjacent property owners.
Okay.
So if you build
you're crowding their space. You're invading their space.
You're invading their space. And many cities have a solar access ordinance where you have to build so far as when the sun is at a certain angle, it doesn't shade their property. Los Altos is like that. So you have to say, if you do a second story addition, you have to be further away. You have to do a line of sight so it doesn't shade.
Well, it's kind of fun. Maybe it's not funny, but I have a friend in Berkeley Hills, and they've got always issues where this guy's trees growing up, and now it's wrecked their view of the bay. So some way or another, natural disasters happen, and those trees seem to come down some way or another.
Well, but most cities have a tree removal permit, as you know, with your palm tree you have to deal with.
Yeah.
So you have to go through a whole process just to take out a tree. I'm doing right now that on a project in Saratoga. We're dealing with a tree removal permit. It's a heritage oak, and we're trying to remove it because you can't develop the property because it's in the way where it was originally planted. But it's a 75-year-old tree. Okay.
Now I can just tell you from what I did in a small project that I just added 130 square feet to a master bedroom. And there was a process that you had to go through. You had to submit the plans, and they had to approve the plans.
Correct.
Well, instead of me explaining, why don't you explain what that process is?
You're doing a good job.
Well, I was starting off doing well, but I would have stumbled. Go ahead.
Okay, so what you'll do is, the first thing you have to do is you have to determine what those requirements from the city are, or what their setbacks or their standards are. Then you design that according to that. And before you do, my recommendation as an architect is before you do the actual construction documents for those permits, you make sure you go to the planning department, provide the documents that they need to get that approved before you go any further. What that does is saves money from the homeowner, minimizes any problems, and now you also know what the rules are.
Okay.
So typically they require a site plan, a floor plan if you're going to do a remodel, so it'd be an existing site plan, existing floor plan, existing elevations. Then you would have a proposed site plan showing the expansion of the building, proposed floor plan with the addition, and then the changes in the elevations. And then the planning department will then approve that before you go to the next phase, which
Okay,
we'll talk about.
but that's why you're working with the homeowner in order to get this done.
Oh, that's correct.
You know,
It's a collaborative effort between the architect, the homeowner, the city requirements, because you want to make everybody happy, obviously. It's their money. You got to work for them. But
Sure.
you got to conform with the rules.
Okay, so you've gotten that far and everything else, and then you have to make sure the materials are to code and everything else, I assume.
That's part of the building permit when you talk about the actual materials.
Okay.
But what's good about the entitlements, and this is very critical, Brian, is those entitlements stay with the property. Doesn't stay with the owner, stays with the property. So when you get it entitled, it becomes a legal document stating that piece of property is entitled to this project on that site for perpetuity.
Okay, and what cost are you looking at in order, for this?
Every city's different. Los Gatos, Palo Alto, Saratoga, they're much more expensive because it's a very community-oriented process. City of San Jose is expensive. Campbell's inexpensive. Cupertino, Sunnyvale. So every city's different.
It's like that on a city transfer tax a lot of times, and when you're going ahead and making a purchase of a home, some cities have a transfer tax where others don't. So
That's correct.
Now, you were talking about, is there any time that entitlements will change from the standpoint that, is there just changes in those? You mentioned when somebody, it's not the owner that has the entitlements of the property.
Well, what happens typically, like the city of San Jose right now is going through what they call their 2010 general plan update. So the general plan is basically your blanket vision for what the city is going to look like from the year 2010 on. And it deals with density and heights and setbacks and uses and all this stuff. So those things are constantly being changed in every city. So you've got to always go back and check with them before you start, because they can change.
And someone like yourself is going to know that, certainly more than the homeowner.
That's exactly why you hire
You
an
got to stay on,
architect.
that's why you stay on top of it, sure.
Yeah.
Last thing is that, does it affect property taxes when you go ahead and do a remodel or anything that adds square footage?
Now, the entitles won't affect the taxes because it's a paper approval. That physical construction has to be completed before it'll change the value, and that's something you're familiar with.
Okay.
So, okay.
Well, the bottom line is that if you have any questions, this is a very complicated thing, and it's not one of these things that, hey, I'm going to knock out a wall and add some square footage. You're going to want to get permitted. You're going to want to do it the right way. I can tell you from personal experience. If you have any questions for my guest, please get a hold of me at 512-8366 or Brian at forbestloan.com. We'll be coming right back with the weekly spotlight and Rhamesis Muncada. My guest is Rhamesis Muncada, and he's the editor of newballpark.org. And, I'm a big baseball fan, and so I'd love to have the Oakland A's move to San Jose, and I'm sure that the team itself, Lou Wolf, would love to come down here. Wouldn't you agree?
I'd love to see it, but mostly because it keeps the team in the Bay Area, and that's a big thing. We've had the A's here for nearly over 40 years now, and I'd like to keep them for as long as possible.
Do you think there's actually a threat that they would, if they don't get things don't work out in San Jose, that they would not stay in Oakland, they go elsewhere?
Sure. If the economy rebounds right, there are markets out there that could challenge for the team. San Antonio or maybe Portland, maybe even Las Vegas, although that seems remote at this point.
Sure. Now, what are some of the things that remain in order to get the ballpark built?
Well, the first thing that has to happen is Major League Baseball, and specifically the commissioner, Bud Selig, has to get the house in order, settle whatever tensions remain between the A's and the Giants over territorial rights to San Jose. Once that happens, then he will sign off on allowing funding for a vote, a referendum that will be necessary for a ballpark to pass in San Jose, and then they can actually get through with a lot of those
So
steps.
first things first is that he's got to sign off, and they just gave him a very lucrative contract, Bud Selig. So he is very much almost seems like a dictator when it comes to these decisions.
For the owners, he's something
Very close to that.
very close to that, maybe a benevolent one, I
Okay.
suppose.
Now, they had the meetings. They apparently had a committee that they put together to discover if this would be a good move. There's also territorial rights that's in the discussion. But this committee has been together, it seems like, for a couple of years now, and it
3
seems-
years.
3 years,
Yeah.
and so what's holding it up?
Well, they keep gathering information, or so they say, and there really isn't any more information to gather. In that 3 years, we've seen the economy go to hell in a handbasket. So I don't know what else there is to gather. However, they did present to the executive council of Major League Baseball's owners, which is a very important step. From there, they can start to figure out what deal needs to be made and then have the owners vote on it. And what they need is 3/4 of the owners to approve the move from Oakland to San Jose.
Okay. And do you have any way to gauge how the owners are feeling on that, reports that come in?
I think that because Lou Wolf is tenured to some degree, he's been almost an owner for 6 years, he is well liked among the owners, that it won't take much pushing to get all the owners on his side. He already has a few that we know of. Jerry Reinsdorf, the owner of Chicago White Sox, is one of them, and he's very important and tenured there. So
Yeah, it doesn't hurt that he's also a fraternity brother of Bud Selig.
no, it does not hurt at all. And they talk about these guys being sort of cronyist, but the fact is there's a reason why Major League Baseball's ownership is called the Lodge, because they are sort of like a lodge.
Yep. Rhamesis, do you think it's going to be hard to overcome the territorial rights that the Giants claim that they have here, and as was part of the agreement to when they did move here?
In the end, I think it really just comes down to money, at some sort of payment. I don't know how it's going to be structured. There may be even some strange doings involving trades that may make it work. The Giants have taken a position that Santa Clara County or South Bay is priceless to them. And so that means there is no price that they will accept. But the fact is, there is a price, and hopefully they'll come to some compromise that works for both teams so that it doesn't hurt the Giants too much, or the A's for that matter.
I'm an avid San Francisco Giants fan, and I can just tell you from a fan standpoint, it's not going to cut down the amount of games I go to San Francisco. I want to get out of the area and go to San Francisco to watch a game. That's part of the whole experience of it. It's an adventure. But I think I would add the amount of games because I'd love to go support the team and what goes on here in San Jose. I was born and raised in San Jose. I would love to have Major League Baseball here. I think other people feel the same way.
Yeah, what it really comes down to is the South Bay has grown tremendously over the last 20, 30 years. And when the A's originally came to the Bay Area, Oakland was the right spot. But Oakland has kind of stayed still for 30 years while San Jose and the South Bay has grown. And if you want to have the Major League Baseball product in the right place to attract the most fans, it would make sense to have teams in San Francisco, which is centrally located to the Bay Area, and San Jose, where you can capture a lot of the fans and the potential revenue here.
Sure, and also the corporate, all the businesses that are around
Absolutely.
here. Now, we just have about a minute yet left, but they shuttered up a lot of these redevelopment agencies. How does that impact anything?
It's huge because, for one thing, any kind of real stadium project, whether you're talking about a new football stadium, baseball stadium, it's going to be hard to get it off the ground. Oakland was trying to do two different solutions with a lot of redevelopment money involved. Those are kind of up in the air at this point as they scramble to find alternatives.
Okay, so that's, I don't know where we go from here with not that being the case, because I think the employees are down to about 10 employees at the redevelopment.
Right,
agency.
in San Jose, they've already been cutting back over the last year and a half anyway. So it's not like they saw this particular thing coming, but it was going to happen sooner or later.
Okay, I hope things work out. I personally would love to see that the Bud Selig's commission. Every day I look in the online to see if they've made a decision, because I know they have the baseball meetings
We
going
may
on.
hear in the next couple months.
Okay, great. Rhamesis Muncada has been our guest. If you want to get a hold of Rhamesis or myself, and my guest, we're at 408-512-8366 and Brian at 4bestloan.com. Also, his website, it's a non-profit group, but it's, where'd it go? He's the editor of newballpark.org, so you can look that up as well. Coming up next, we have in the lifestyle segment, the general manager here at CreaTV, Suzanne St. John Crane. We'll be right back. My guest is the general manager here at CreaTV, Suzanne St. John Crane. I had her come on last year about this time, the beginning of the year, because I've been doing this since 1990, and I got to tell you that we've changed buildings and different entities have run it, but this is the first time that I can tell you that it's really a nonprofit is running it, and supported completely by people's funds and the good people out there. But I tell you, Suzanne, it's really gone up, just the quality and the care that people have here at CreaTV.
Thanks a lot. No, it's been going gangbusters. In the nonprofit life cycle, you have sort of startup mode, and then you go into the teenage years where there's all this growth, and I sort of feel like that's where we are right now. Just a lot of growth, new opportunities coming in the door, and people excited about using us as a resource.
Sure. Now, let's look back at 2011.
Right.
And so, how do you mentioned it sounds like if you feel like you're a teenager now, that maybe early in the year you were probably 11, 12 years old. Just getting out of elementary school. So,
Right.
But there's been a lot of growth.
Lots,
And so,
yeah.
what would you say some of the monumental things in 2011 were?
I would say, the biggie for us, the crown jewel of our year, was our media access program, where CreaTV has a restricted fund for equipment only. We can only spend it on equipment. And so we decided to actually take $500,000 worth of our reserves and buy digital media equipment for 16 San Jose schools. And now each of those schools has a 30-minute show on our education channel, our new education channel. So that's huge. I mean, that impacts thousands and thousands of kids and schools that now have a voice on our channels, know how to use these tools. And it was so exciting, Brian, to hear a couple of seniors who I had an opportunity to talk to who use this equipment say, this is what's keeping me in school. Like, this is the class I'm excited about. So that's the payoff for us that we're very excited about. So that, of course, was huge. The other biggie was we launched coverage of high school sports with our new production van. So we launched coverage of 10 football games with 2 professional commentators, 3 cameras, HD, replay, the whole thing in the fall. And, our staff, it was so much fun. Of course, we're sort of football fanatics. Just got my voice back from the last 49er playoff games.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Well, I can't wait to see the Glee, comparative of being in television production. We're going to see that on TV one day.
Yeah, we'll have to work on that one. We'll have to work on that one. There's something's in the works about doing a live jazz jam here on Channel 30 with San Jose Jazz. So you might see that this year. We're hoping.
Okay.
So I would love to see more music in the studio and showcase some of the great talent and musicians in the South Bay.
Okay. So if you were to look at 2011, and you're saying that the monumental thing that happened was that reaching out. It's basically an outreach to all these schools that received this equipment that didn't have it before.
Correct.
And it's making a huge impact in the lives of a lot of kids.
Absolutely. And the community that gets to say, oh my gosh,
Sure.
Look what's going on at, an East Side School District and the Cambrian and San Jose Unified. So that's huge. And of course, we're growing our youth media programs this year. We were able to get a grant from the Office of Cultural Affairs San Jose, and we're going to launch a film academy for 5th through 12th graders who want to take classes here. It's going to be $25 for a class, and they'll be able to learn claymation or editing or, documentary filmmaking, taught by folks that do it in the industry. So
Sure. Now, let's talk about the CreaTV Awards.
Yeah.
And that was another big event, second annual, I believe you just had. And you had a wonderful turnout.
yeah, about 450 folks came.
I'm making a vow I will be there next year.
Good.
And,
You're on the list.
Yeah, but just tell me the different categories that people are watching the show that they don't realize that they could have their own show.
Right. It's funny.
Or not just show, but their own production.
Absolutely. They can use us as a resource. So this year we added Technical Excellence Awards. And so, we have categories like best nonprofit video, best corporate non-commercial video, best student video or educator. So it's less about the topic and more about who made the video. And so we have folks that are entering feature films or PSAs, or I think there were a couple of companies that actually entered videos that they produced of community outreach activities that their departments did. So real hodgepodge, interesting, diverse mix of videos. This year, though, we included creative excellence, so we awarded an editor, director, cinematographer, and producer. And we also decided to award a couple folks the Community Media Champion Award because, frankly, we have some amazing advocates in Sacramento and here locally in San Jose that are the reason we're here. So we decided to recognize that and educate people on, hey, here's what it takes to keep a place like this solvent and thriving.
Well, I'd love to see more. I can just tell you from the time slots that you have lotteries, but your show, all these time slots, it's unprecedented in how many people are having shows. And I think this area in particular is flourishing with it.
Absolutely. CreaTV is, at least when I did the survey about a year and a half ago, we had more series producers on our channels than any other access center in the state. So a lot of people like yourself love to come in and do series. But again, when we took over, it was sort of, we wanted to make sure folks can do other types of productions too. So student produced PSAs, movies, et cetera, sports coverage. So it's diversifying.
It's whatever you
want.
want. So, all right. I won't talk about the body piercings that I saw a long time ago before you.
Wow. Good times. Good times.
My guest has been Suzanne St. Jane Crane. She's the general manager here at CreaTV. I want to tell you, if you're thinking about doing television or a documentary or something like that, this is the place to do it. And get a hold of CreaTV. You can either call them up or do what we do today and email them or get the information. But it's a wealth of information. It's a great community outreach. And I want to thank all my guests for coming on the program today. Jeff Hansen with Keller Williams, Kurt Anderson with Anderson Architect, Rhamesis Muncada, who's the editor of newballpark.org, and Suzanne St. Jane Crane. Hope you join us next week here on Get Real. Good night.